ad buy, which in Massachusetts in an off-year election is a whole heck of a lot of money. Mitch McConnell, the top Republican in the Senate, he's sending out solicitations to please try to win the Republicans this Senate seat in Massachusetts. The Republicans are just pulling out all the stops. And you know what? Special elections are unpredictable. You never really know what's going to happen. That's how we got Scott Brown in the first place in blue state Massachusetts. But in this special election, the Republican candidate so far has not done all that great a job making his case for himself. His name is Gabriel Gomez. He's an ex-Navy SEAL. He is a private equity guy. The Democrat in the race is Congressman Ed Markey, longtime congressman from Massachusetts. Mr. Gomez has so far attacked Congressman Markey for being in Congress too long. Gabriel Gomez also once called Ed Markey pond scum, but it was not all that clear why. Because Mr. Gomez is not that great of a talker, Ed Markey's campaign against him has had the luxury of running ads that are just uninterrupted clips of Gabriel Gomez trying to explain himself, like this one.
Would you release a list of all your clients when you were at Advent International so the public knows who you've worked with and what kind of investments you've made and dealt with?
Advent International is a private organization. I have to discuss it with them and leave it up to them. I'm not employed at Advent International anymore.
Would you ask them to release the names of your clients?
I resigned 2 weeks ago. I have more than to discuss it with them.
I asked you what list, if you disclose your client list from your private equity days at Advent International. You said you didn't know if they'd allow it. You asked them. Have you asked them?
I have asked them.
And what did they say?
They haven't come back to me.
On March 22nd, you were here. I asked you if you released your client list from Advent International. You were there 9 years. You said they're happy to discuss it with them. You were back 2 weeks later, April 5th. I asked them. You said they haven't come back to me yet. Have you gotten it yet?
You got to ask Advent International about it. It's they're a private firm, and it's really up to them.
But would you state now that you would like them to release it? You do think the public has a right to know what you're doing for 9 years in some detail, right?
No, I have no qualms if Advent wants to release that information, but I also respect that they're a private firm, and it's really up to them.
That's the way it's been going so far in this Massachusetts Senate race. But tonight in Massachusetts, it was the first debate between the guy who you just saw talking his way through the attack ad against him, between the Republican candidate Gabriel Gomez and the Democratic Senate candidate Congressman Ed Markey. This was the first of what will be 3 debates before the Senate election in Massachusetts, which takes place 3 weeks from now.
You're going to see 2 different styles here tonight. You're going to see somebody who's going to try to scare you. I'm going to speak from the heart. I'm going to tell you the truth. I think the people in Massachusetts are smart enough to realize that they're going to want to have somebody they want to vote for as opposed to against.
You're going to hear a lot from Mr. Gomez about how he is a new kind of Republican. But you're going to hear the same old, stale Republican ideas. And that's going to be a big part of what this debate is all about. I've had a job down in Washington. It's been to battle Tea Party Republicans to bring out interests that are contrary to Massachusetts. I've been down there fighting the Newt Gingrich Republicans. And both Newt Gingrich and Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, they're both endorsed and sent contributions up to Mr. Gomez. And they want Mr. Gomez down there to help them get the majority that will ultimately further this gridlock.
This is the Massachusetts Senate debate that it just wrapped up tonight, just about an hour ago. This is the first of 3 of them that there's going to be. The reason this Senate race is happening in the first place, the reason there is an open Senate seat in Massachusetts, is because John Kerry, who was the senior senator from Massachusetts, he of course gave up this Senate seat in February to become Secretary of State. But Senator Kerry was not the person everybody initially expected President Obama to nominate for the Secretary of State job. Everybody expected that the Secretary of State nominee was instead going to be this person, the UN Ambassador Susan Rice. Susan Rice, by all accounts, was going to be the president's nominee for Secretary of State until Republicans in Congress decided that they were going to go after her for Benghazi, which she had nothing to do with. But they decided they would go after her for the talking points that were drafted by the CIA after the Benghazi attacks. Susan Rice used those talking points in September 2012 on the Sunday shows. Nobody in Congress made all that big a deal out of her appearance on those Sunday shows at the time, until months later when it seemed like she was going to be nominated to be the next Secretary of State. And then suddenly, Susan Rice, having used those CIA talking points on TV, made it impossible, unfathomable for Senate Republicans that she could ever hold the Secretary of State job because she used the talking points the CIA gave her. And it was around that time that Senate Republicans also just started calling her names.
Susan Rice appears to be the front runner now for Secretary of State. You told CBS last night that you will do everything to stop her confirmation. Why?
She's not qualified. If this select committee, if appointed, clears her of any wrongdoing, besides not being very bright, I'm not going to promote somebody who I think has misled the country or is either incompetent. That's my view of Susan Rice.
Incompetent, not very bright. Those rather over-the-top attacks against Susan Rice led to one of the angrier moments from President Obama that we have seen in his entire presidency.
If Senator McCain and Senator Graham and others want to go after somebody, they should go after me. For them to go after the UN ambassador, who had nothing to do with Benghazi, and was simply making a presentation based on intelligence that she had received, and to besmirch her reputation, is outrageous. When they go after the UN ambassador, apparently because they think she's an easy target, then they've got a problem with me. And should I choose, if I think that she would be the best person to serve America in the capacity of the State Department, then I will nominate her.
President Obama did not nominate her to the State Department. Ambassador Rice withdrew her name from consideration, saying that the confirmation process would be too lengthy, disruptive, and costly. So instead of Susan Rice, John Kerry got the Secretary of State gig, and Susan Rice stayed on as our nation's UN ambassador. Until today. Today, President Obama gave Susan Rice a new job. A very powerful new job for which there happens to be no Senate confirmation process. President Obama announcing today that Susan Rice will be his new national security advisor. The president also naming Samantha Power as his nominee to replace Ambassador Rice at the United Nations. Samantha Power will face a Senate confirmation. Today's announcement comes on the heels of the 3 nominees the president announced in the Rose Garden yesterday for appeals court judges, nominees to the powerful D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Nominees who themselves are pretty uncontroversial, but who Republicans have reacted to with outrage. So those 3 nominees yesterday, Susan Rice and Samantha Power named today, President Obama clearly not shying away from a fight these days. But how hard a fight are any of these moves expected to be, and were they unexpected? Joining us now is Andrea Mitchell, NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent and host of Andrea Mitchell Reports on MSNBC. Andrea, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, my pleasure.
So you and I talked on this show the night that Susan Rice had withdrawn her name from consideration for Secretary of State. What do you think is the overall political significance of her being tapped now for National Security Advisor instead?
Well, I think that the clip that you showed of the president at that post-election news conference where he said, you know, if you want to attack the Benghazi policy, come after me. And it was right out of the American President, the Aaron Sorkin movie. And he said, you know, but don't go after her. That is outrageous. That told you so much. This president really likes Susan Rice, wanted her at his side. She will be a very different kind of national security advisor. She will be very tough, very forceful, very energized. Some say she is less political, interestingly, than Tom Donilon, who has really come across as a statesman but had a political background. That she really isn't political enough, and that's why she got herself in trouble with the Republicans, who they found her a lightning rod. And the fact is that, as you know, the final release of all of those emails that went into the writing of those Benghazi talking points completely vindicated Susan Rice. She had nothing to do with the creation of the talking points. She was basically the spokesperson for the administration that Sunday, and that was the extent of her involvement. She was not responsible for Benghazi security. The substantive failures there that have been well exposed. So this is really a vindication and a validation of her relationship with the president, her role, and she is in the catbird seat. And let's face it, she is going to be the gatekeeper for all of the national security or foreign policy team. And that means that John Kerry has to really go through Susan Rice for access to the President of the United States.
In some ways, National Security Advisor, at least in terms of its proximity to the President, is a more powerful job. And in that way, well, given her background, what we've seen both at the Clinton administration, her time in the Clinton administration, her time at the UN, the way that she handled the whole Benghazi controversy, deserved or not, Do you think that substantively we should expect a shift in national security strategy and approach with having Susan Rice there as opposed to having Donald in there?
Well, I think that the interesting thing is that she has been in the past more interventionist in her sort of her DNA and the way she approaches policies, such as Libya. But she has not been so far on Syria. I think she fully appreciates the complexity of the bad choices, all of the choices being bad on Syria. So I don't see a real impulse on either her part or Samantha Power to change policy on Syria from what it has been. In general, she's less cautious than Tom Donilon. I think certainly closer to the president, has a deeper relationship with him. John Kerry, by the way, made a statement in Guatemala. He had a news conference in Guatemala where he is at the Organization of American States tonight, was not here for these announcements, and said, described her as brilliant, top diplomat, someone who he pointed out, is quick to point out, had worked for him and supported him in his 2004 presidential race. So he is applauding these new colleagues.
In terms of the Samantha Power nomination, UN ambassador is a high-profile job. It's not as high-profile as something like Secretary of State, but she will have to be Senate confirmed. She has been a blistering critic of previous United States decisions to intervene or not intervene on the basis of humanitarian concerns in other conflicts abroad. That's really sort of where she made her bones. It's where she won her Pulitzer Prize.
This girl ever shut up?
From Hell. Do you think that it's going to be a difficult confirmation for her? Are you seeing anything about how those lines are shaping up?
All right, Rachel, let's go to a commercial here, please.
It could be, and not.
You've been
because
talking since 9
necessarily
o'clock
because
here.
She has done, but as a proxy fight over Susan Rice,
You mean,
over whom they have no
this is
control.
how they put people to sleep.
Could
I mean,
go after Samantha Power. We've seen similar things happen in the past.